What's up everybody, I'm Seth Fowler and today I'm reviewing the brand new Nike Vapormax 2019. As we all know, 2018 was a great year for sneaker releases, and that's mainly because there was so much variety of shoes being released. There were brand new silhouettes, there was new collaborations, and then of course updates on previous silhouettes from years before. One of the sneakers to be updated last year, kind of quietly, was the Vapormax, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the original Vapormax that had a full Flyknit upper and then that mouthguard sort of Vapormax outsole. Well, last year Nike decided to change things up with their popular silhouette, and maybe not in the way that you'd expect. The Vapormax 2019 is the latest iteration of the Vapormax, and it first dropped back in November of 2018. And as you can probably tell, the only thing that really changed about this sneaker was the upper. They kept this entire mouthguard sort of Vapormax outsole situation the same. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Vapormax silhouette because it just doesn't work for my foot. This outsole doesn't really rest on my foot well, and it always feels like work when I'm walking in the sneaker. But I'm sure there are people out there who really love this outsole, so I won't bash this sneaker during the review. I'm just gonna be honest, and there are things about the shoe that I liked and things about it that I didn't. And as much as I would like to see this midsole and outsole setup change, that's sort of the main selling point behind the sneaker, and that's where Nike's research dollars went when they were working on the Nike Vapormax, so I think we're gonna be stuck with this outsole for a long time. But hey, if you like it, that's a great thing. So jumping into the sneaker itself, it looks like Nike's decided to change things up from that original Flyknit upper that we've had on the Vapormax 1s and the Vapormax 2s. Instead, it looks like Nike opted to use this clear plastic mesh that they've used on other sneakers like the Nike Element React. From what I've read, it seems like Nike actually changed up the material for added support and durability, and so far while wearing the shoe, it does seem a little bit more supportive, especially around the toes and the midfoot of the shoe, so I guess that change makes sense. The upper of the Vapormax 2019 now consists of a dual layer construction, which is made up of multiple panels stitched together. The uppermost layer is obviously made up of this translucent mesh, and then underneath that you actually have this really stretchy, thin fabric. Because of the fabric underlay, you can't actually see through the sneaker like you can with the Nike React Element 87s, but I actually think that's a good thing because the fabric underlay makes this sneaker a lot more comfortable, at least in the upper. As I mentioned, and it's especially obvious on the toe, you've got multiple panels stitched together, and then the stitching is actually covered up by this sort of brown fuse overlay. It kind of gives the upper a unique look, and it definitely fits in better with the new sort of Nike sportswear aesthetic. Moving up the sneaker to the base of the tongue, you get to these yellow rope laces that are actually held in place by these black lace loops. One of the biggest changes between the Vapormax 19 and the previous Vapormaxes is that unlike the previous Vapormaxes where the laces were held in place by flywire, this time around the Vapormax 19 has laces held in place by this sort of internal midfoot cage construction. And I would actually assume that Nike used this translucent mesh to sort of show off this midfoot cage construction just so you get an idea of what you're buying with the sneaker. These two black lace loops in the center of the midfoot are actually attached to this internal orange midfoot cage. So similar to Flyknit, when you actually tighten the laces, it pulls the upper around the midfoot of the shoe together. Not only that, but because this internal midfoot cage is actually wider and thicker than flywire, in theory it should hold your foot better in place than flywire does. Not only that, but Nike's also given this sneaker a separate tongue, which means you can customize the fit a little bit better. Moving up the sneaker to the top of the tongue, you get this sort of futuristic silver metallic tongue tag. This tag almost gives the shoe a lunar lander look, which I'm not sure if I like yet. Moving inside the shoe, you've got a very minimal upper. Your foot is just up against that stretchy fabric, and around the ankle you have a little bit of padding. The insole of the shoe comes in black with Vapormax text printed on the heel in red. As for fit, honestly, I kind of like the way this feels on foot. This lacing system does actually give you a slightly better fit than Flyknit does, and even though I usually prefer knits to this sort of plasticky material because it's just a lot more breathable, this doesn't actually feel bad on foot, and you still get some airflow, which is kind of surprising. As for the actual sizing on the Vapormax 2019, it is pretty different than the original Vapormax. The Vapormax 2019 definitely runs big. I actually decided to go a half size down in this sneaker because my true size was too big. And that's actually pretty weird because in the original Vapormax, I went a half size up because I felt like that just felt a little bit better on my foot. Not only that, but the Vapormax 2019 is also wider than the original Vapormax. So if you have a wider foot, this is not a bad way to go. This is a shoe that I would definitely suggest trying on before you buy it because the sizing is pretty significantly different than the previous Vapormax. If you're a wide footer, go true to size. If you're a narrow footer like me, maybe go down half a size, and if you're just not sure what you are, go true to size and you should be okay. Continuing back on the shoe to the midfoot, you actually get to this white stuck-on Nike swoosh, which I've got to say actually stands out really nicely on this upper. Underneath that, you've got the internal midfoot cage that we talked about earlier, and aesthetically, I actually like the way it looks. I think it provides a really nice contrast against the gold upper. This look actually reminds me a lot of Nike running shoes that I grew up on, and it kind of makes me a little bit nostalgic. Not too nostalgic, because I don't love the Vapormax, but it's still a pretty nice looking upper. Continuing even farther back, you've got this piece of fuse overlay with the Vapormax logo repeated pleated in black. And then just below that, you've got this new, pretty beefy TPU heel clip, which actually locks your foot into the sneaker pretty nicely. Then moving to the heel of the sneaker, you've got this sort of pinkish reddish pull tab to match the Vapormax outsole, and I've got to say it's not a perfect match, but it's not a bad look overall. Then moving down on the sneaker, you get to the pretty much unchanged Vapormax midsole and outsole. Now, because you guys probably already know how I feel about this Vapormax midsole and outsole setup, I'm not really going to go into it because I don't want to hate on a shoe that I don't actually hate. I don't think it's the worst outsole in the world. I don't think it's a terrible setup. It's not uncomfortable, but it's just not for me. The one difference between the 2019's Vapormax midsole unit and previous Vapormax midsole units is that it looks like they've actually gone for sort of a candy paint look, at least on this particular colorway. You've got sort of a translucent red candy coating. Most recently though, I wore a pair of Vapormaxes over the weekend, and it really felt like every time I stepped down, I almost had to put in work to pull my foot back up. But the more I wore it, the less I noticed it, and maybe that's how my stride is, I'm not totally sure, but the Vapormax is not really a shoe I enjoy wearing, and so for that reason, even though I really like the upper of this sneaker, this is probably not a shoe that I'm going to wear on a regular basis. If you want to hear more of what I have to say about this midsole unit, check out some of my previous Vapormax reviews because I've reviewed a bunch of Vapormaxes. And again, honestly, I really think it's just my foot. Other people seem to love this shoe, so I don't know, you might have to just try it for yourself, but it's not for me. Overall, the Vapormax 2019's complete overhaul of the upper is surprisingly comfortable and a surprising improvement over the previous version. I did not expect to like this upper more. I was really surprised because it's the same price as the Flyknit version, and in my head it just seems like cheaper materials, but I don't think it is, and it really does give you more support. If you are one of those people that loves the Vapormax Air unit but doesn't love the Flyknit upper of your previous Vapormaxes, this is a really good way to go. If you just want a new Vapormax or just really love the way this one looks, again, it's not a bad option. But if you don't like the Vapormax and haven't liked the Vapormax, you're not going to like this one either. It's pretty much more the same. But that's pretty much all I've got to say about the 2019 Vapormax. Now, I would love to know your thoughts on this sneaker and whether you're planning to grab a pair for yourself, so make sure to leave those comments in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe down below if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.